Okay. So we are live on Facebook. Okay, again, hi everyone. I am Suzahat Nisar from Faisalabad Hub in Pakistan, and today we are conducting another live session on coronavirus, also known as COVID-19. And we are conducting these live sessions because we get a lot of information from the news channels and from the social media, but we don't have the opportunity to connect and interact with the people directly from those countries. So we are doing this to get a more in-depth view, a personal opinion from your side, what's happening in your country, what's the current situation, and what the future scenarios might be. And yeah, I welcome you all here in this live session, and thank you very much for joining me today. And yeah, we might begin by introducing ourselves. So I already have introduced myself. Shimilka, would you like to start by introducing yourself to the people?
Absolutely. Hi guys, my name is Shamilka and I am the curator of the Candy Hub.
Great, thank you. Khalid?
Okay, hi guys, I'm Khalid Nursani. I'm the curator for Kabul Hub, Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. Vanishka?
Hi everyone, I'm Vanshika. I'm the curator of the New Delhi Hub, India.
Great, and Utkarsh?
Hi, I'm Utkarsh. I am a global shaper from the New Delhi Hub. I am the founder of Network Capital, and I'm very interested in why people do what they do professionally. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for joining me today and being here. So I also first would like to do a little disclaimer to the people who are watching us right now live on Facebook. So we will be providing you with some information, with some figures. So I just want to remind you that those figures might be fluctuating from the actual scenario. So we all have our own sources, but they can be differentiating from the actual happening. So, okay, I would like to start by Sri Lanka. Shamilka, can you tell us about the current situation regarding coronavirus?
Absolutely. So currently Sri Lanka has 102 patients tested positive for COVID-19, out of which 2 have recovered so far. Our first case was reported on the 11th of March. And so far, but fortunately, we have had no deaths. So that's a big positive for us here in Sri Lanka. But that being said, we are on our 7th day of curfew. We don't know when it will end. The government and all the civil society and all stakeholders are taking all possible measures to contain this. Currently, we also have about 46 quarantine centers where about 3,000 plus people are going through the process of quarantine. Out of which about 700 have already been released, foreigners and Sri Lankans after the 14-day quarantine period. So that is the situation so far. And on a very positive note, for the past 24 hours, and even today, we have not reported any COVID-19 positive cases tested so far. So we've been safe for the past 24 hours, which is definitely a positive outlook for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, definitely. And what about Khalid? What can you tell us about Afghanistan?
Well, in Afghanistan, the spread of coronavirus hasn't been that rapid, thankfully, so far. We only have 79 reported cases, out of which we have only 2 deaths. Like personally, I'm not really sure whether coronavirus was the cause of those deaths, but you know, this is something that is reported. We're not really sure how rapid the spread of this virus is going to be, because it doesn't only depend on how you interact or contact with other people, but it also comes back to how you conduct yourself in terms of hygiene, in terms of you know, the cleanliness that you observe, and we also have to keep in mind the financial you know, position of people, especially in Afghanistan. So we have to take all these things into consideration when we're talking about the spread of this virus. And so far, we were able to control it, to limit the spread as much as we can. But we're not really sure how it's going to unfold in near future, because there are hundreds and thousands of people coming in to Afghanistan from Iran, and some people from Pakistan as well. So we have to just make sure that people who are coming in from outside, they're properly tested for coronavirus, so that we can at least control and limit the spread of it.
Okay, good to know. Vanchika, what's the current situation in India?
So, in India at the moment, we are at day 2 of a 21-day lockdown. And we have about 680 cases, which includes Indian citizens as well as foreigners. 43 people have recovered, and about 13 fatalities. The problem with India is its size and scale. So we have a population of 1.3 billion, and out of that, we have about 29 states, and each state is almost, some of the states are bigger than countries put together. So two states which are badly hit include Maharashtra and Kerala, and both have around more than 100 cases. Now, as we know, the disease is, it's essentially, as it's been called, a passport disease, right? So it's been spreading through people who have had contact with countries that have been the epicenter and have then brought it to their home countries. In India, we're at that stage where it's going from a passport disease to an urban disease, and from an urban to a urban and potentially rural disease. So we are at stage 3, and we're trying to prevent community transmission at this point, and that's the most critical. And that's why, though the government and the overall response has been very proactive, they almost 2 weeks back had stopped international movement of people internationally. There was this Sunday, before the formal lockdown, we had a Jan curfew, which was essentially a way for the Prime Minister to get the citizens of India to have a voluntary lockdown, and to kind of just have a simulated exercise. And I think that was just a taste of what was coming next, which was the lockdown that was announced yesterday. So at this point, the next 3 weeks are very critical for India. And if I can just add, in terms of numbers, we're at a stage where, people have done comparisons between Italy and Iran, and we're at that, the 400 plus mark, where, if we can break the cycle through this 3-week lockdown and then see how things goes, that's why it's that critical. Because from here, the doubling, tripling, quadrupling of numbers is where it starts. So.
Okay. Yeah, so in Pakistan, it's like there have been discovered more than 900 cases. And it is said that the most cases are in the province of Punjab and Sindh. And also what I got to know most recently is that approximately 78% of the cases were from people who came from Iran to Pakistan. So that's the most recent information I have about Pakistan. So, okay, moving on. I would like to continue with Utkarsh. Are you there?
Yes, I am there.
So we got an approximate idea about the situation in India. So can you tell me about how the government is dealing with the situation?
Sure. I think Vanchika did cover what government's doing, but what I'm really energized is how communities like the Global Shapers are coming together and working with civil societies, government, and private organizations. And it's for the first time after a long time that we're seeing all stakeholders come together to solve a global problem without an agenda. So it's something that's a welcome experience in of course South Asian countries, but also globally. So that's what I'm energized by. The government has taken a bunch of proactive measures, but governmental measures are not going to be enough if there isn't participation from civil society, communities, and so forth. And we are definitely seeing steps in the right direction. The term social distancing has become really popular. And I think it's a misnomer. People should start calling it physical distancing, because at times like these, we need to strengthen our social bonds. So let's stop calling things social distancing in India and in South Asia and everywhere. and instead call it physical distancing, because communities like the global shapers are connecting so often and have so much to share. So it's a time where we can really augment our bonds. And I feel it's a time for us to reevaluate things and get back to the basics. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I really like the point that we should call it more physical distancing because people still are engaging with each other, and we should start being more active socially. Like we have those platforms, we have social media, we have apps like Zoom. So it's a great point that you just mentioned. Thank you. Khalid, can you tell me something about the government? How is the government dealing there in Afghanistan?
The government, before coming to that question, I also agree with Utkarsh on, when we're talking about the social distancing, we know that technology in the past has changed the way we interact with people. It has, more from a physical or in-person interaction, we have moved to virtual interactions. And the coronavirus itself is gonna, make it worse in the next coming 1 or 2 or 3 months. We don't exactly know. But yes, it's not really about social distancing, it's about physical distancing. And at the same time, we should make sure that we have more conversations going on social level, be it through social media, be it through any other virtual communication mediums that we have. As far as the government is concerned, I think the government has taken precautionary measures. We have not gone on into a lockdown yet. So one of the provinces that have more of the cases, and the large majority of the cases, is Herat. And right now there are discussions going on within our leadership that province needs to go into lockdown. But there are, pros and cons to do that. So we are right now evaluating what is the best way forward. And hopefully, right measures are taken, right decisions are taken, because we don't want this virus to spread the way it is spreading right now, because Herat is bordering with Iran. It's like, first of all, we shouldn't really be blaming where this virus is coming from. It is here. This is the reality right now. But what we can do collectively to stop this, this is something that we need to look into. So as far as the government is concerned, we are taking precautionary measures. We are looking into mapping down all the processes within the government institutions where we don't stop all the facilities for its citizens, but we make sure that the actions that we're taking or the facilities that we are providing to the public, they don't stop, but at the same time we make sure that people who are coming in and working in these organizations are COVID-19 free. So we're looking into right now a lot of our government organizations. What they're doing is they have split the working hours into 2 different sections. So in 2 different working hours. So what we're doing is so that the reason why we're doing that is because first of all, we create that enough space between different 2 employees, so that we can the 2 meter or the 3 meter space that we have, which is a recommended space by the doctors and all that. So we maintain that space, and at the same time, we can do what is required to provide those facilities to the general public as well, because we can't really afford to go on incomplete lockdown. So we have to look at alternative ways of how we can manage both sides of both sides right now.
Yeah, I agree with you because I have observed that the leaders here in Pakistan say the same thing, that they can't go proper in lockdown because there are too many other issues that would arise with the lockdown. So they are looking for other measures, and they are suggesting, although to people, that they should stop going out, implement that physical distancing, and but yeah, it's up to the people, obviously. But I really, because I feel like the governments all around the world are putting so much effort in it, even though governments from those you might have not expected that thing. But it's always a huge part. It's up to the people how they respond to it. So yeah, it's a good point. So Shamilka, can you tell me something about the government in Sri Lanka, how the government is dealing with the current situation regarding COVID-19, and also tell me how the public is reacting to the current issue, like for example, the lockdowns that are being implemented.
Yes. So first of all, as I told before, we are on day 7 of curfew. So the curfew was declared about 9 days after the first COVID-19 patient was tested positive. Again, all airports and ports have been closed for any arrivals apart from cargo and transit flights. We had a lot of debate in Sri Lanka about general elections, parliamentary elections happening next month. Fortunately, the government has taken a decision to not have elections going ahead and to postpone it. Then in terms of the curfew, obviously, as Khalid also mentioned, having a curfew means that you have to go through a rough time and it's not easy. It's a lot to deal with. So we have essential services declared, such as health. Then obviously the tri-forces and the police are playing a very active role in helping everybody, not limited to their own role, but going beyond. We also have banking sector, agriculture, fisheries, and all of those also declared as essential services, because you need to have a smooth flow of goods coming into the market, and people need to have access to the basic necessities they have. Apart from that, 3 districts in Sri Lanka has been declared as high risk zones. So because of this, we also know that there is a possibility where people of essential services and people who have very urgent issues can travel in Sri Lanka with a curfew permit. However, there are restrictions imposed where people cannot cross boundaries. They can't go from a district to another district, even though curfew can be lifted for a certain period. So in certain districts, when we don't have any cases reported, we make sure that a person from another district does not bring the virus into an area that is not infected. So measures like that have been taken. But a huge toll here is being borne by the daily wage earners in Sri Lanka. That is the informal sector. So that is where the public response should be discussed more, because these are people where their livelihoods they just don't have a way of earning an income, because these are daily wage earners. So there's a lot of civil society and a lot of volunteers are actively helping them whenever possible to give provisions and other means of care. Apart from that, the government has also been giving economic relief in terms of repayments of loans and grace periods, even for credit card payments, deadlines to pay, as in extensions of deadlines to pay utility payments, income tax, VAT, and even renewals of licenses and things of that nature. So everything is being done to normalize things, even though we are in a period of curfew. So that's how things are. But the response of the people, it can be, again, just in various ways, because even with curfew, we had about 2,600 people who violated curfew and they had to be arrested for curfew violations. So we also have panic buying and even some vendors making use of this situation and having black market prices for vegetables and things of that sort. So we have that side of the story as well. Things are not this very flowery, it's not a flowery picture that we have over here. So we have that side of the story as well. But so far, I think with everyone's collective effort, we are doing pretty decent.
Okay, you told me that there are some high-risk zones. Can you tell me more about how the high-risk zones are identified? Like, what's the benchmark for a district to be a high-risk zone?
So that is basically, as I said, we have 102 patients tested so far for COVID-19, and out of which, when we look at geographically where are these patients located, we see Colombo being the hub of the economic hub of Sri Lanka, and a couple of other districts where a lot of people who lived abroad, like mostly Italy and even Korea, where they are highly residential areas from that side. So people who live in these geographic locations um, obviously have been tested positive for COVID-19, and we have a higher number of cases where from them you know how the chain goes, where their family and friends, and it just goes on. And that's how we are at stage 3 now, as declared by WHO. So that's how we categorize the high risk zones. So I mean, even so, my area actually where I live right now, it's not a high risk zone. So about like every 3 days, we have curfew lifted for a couple of hours where people can go and buy goods and come back home. But high risk zones, so far, what has been declared is no curfew lifting will be there. But the government has made this very effective mechanism, hopefully, which is set to be implemented this week, where they will be given goods, as in the goods will be brought to their houses. So there'll be no curfew lifting even for a couple of hours until further notice for the high risk zones. And that's how it's working in Sri Lanka right now.
Okay. Yeah, Vanchika, can you tell me about, like you have told us how the government is dealing with the current situation, but how are the people coping with the current situation? How are they reacting? Because I have observed, especially in the South Asian countries, I can talk especially from Pakistan, that people are, like Shamika said, violating the curfews, which has been implemented by the government, and still are going out and doing those daily routines that they are used to. So what's the scene in India?
Right. Um, so, you know, at the moment, the next 21 days is a lot of um, work for authorities to implement and execute this lockdown, because now this is you know, something which is enforceable. It's not voluntary like the previous 1 day simulated exercise that we had, and that makes it the world's largest lockdown in history, in a sense, essentially, if you look at it that way. So what happens now is that once the central government has given this directive, how this is implemented at the state level, at the district level, and below, becomes very critical. And what is praiseworthy is that till now most people have been indoors, but it's also early times. But when the announcement was made, there were I mean, things like hoarding and so on, you know, nascent shoots of that were visible. So people in their localities could see a sudden rush where people were trying to just stock up essential commodities, goods, perishable goods, etc. But the government has, at the central and different states, have tried to reiterate that they are going to make sure that you know, not only provision of goods, grains, vegetables, foods, etc., which comes under the ambit of essential services, will be running, but that from the, you know, the Ministry of Home Affairs, etc., very clear directives have been sent out where they've listed out what are the essential services which are going to be on, you know, and they're trying their best to also kind of spread as much knowledge and information as possible. So the fact that your ration shops are going to be open, obviously, people at the front lines, your medical workers, you know, doctors, nurses, you know, your basic backbone in terms of administration, so on, all of that is going to be in place. And then, of course, with other institutions trying to figure out what are the best ways to kind of work from home, how to restructure, reorganize institutional systems, all of that is happening. So actually, I think not only at the societal level, but also at the institutional and individual level, people are trying to reorient their lives and look at how can the next 3 weeks be planned better. And as was mentioned before, that you know, in this time of social distancing is different, physical distancing is different from social distancing, and I think that is you know, very clear, because you know, people it's great to see that even services like people who are owners and founders of things like dance companies and other such things are carrying on their services through webinars, through kind of virtual classes. So all of that is continuing. Companies, teams are creating models where, you know, they kind of just rethink the whole nature of working and living during these 21 days. So I think that's what's happening at the moment. And I'd also like to state that in terms of what's happening, we also have our finance minister, who's actually announced recently that a 1,70,000 crore package for poor daily wage earners has been brought out, to make sure that those who are at the margins have certain social safety nets in place. I think at multiple levels, financially, socially, institutionally, everybody's just trying to reorient, to prepare better for the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of loopholes. People don't know how to deal with the time they have now spare. But there are some initiatives that have been started, especially through those virtual platforms. You are completely right, and I would like to get back to this later. But right now, I would like to ask Khaled about the response from the public towards the implementations of the government.
Well, the response is kind of mixed. Some people, a lot of people are campaigning for, social distancing, making sure that precautionary measures are taken into consideration. The, day-to-day contact is limited. But at the same time, we have to understand that we're living in a country where, all these social interactions are so embedded in our culture that at times it becomes very difficult to, take distance from it. We're talking about, shaking hands. We're talking about hugging each other. And we're talking about, sitting and having, face-to-face conversations. These things are so embedded in our culture that at times, if you don't do it, people will consider it disrespectful, especially when we're talking about, elderly people. And I think all of us, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Sri Lanka, we kind of share the same culture. So at times it becomes very difficult, especially for me as well, even though I know what the implications of these, doing these things will be. But what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, we need to make sure how we conduct ourselves. And this is the same message that we're trying to give to the public as well. There are a lot of people who are welcoming all these precautionary measures that are taken by the government. There are people who are not really happy with everything that the government has done, and they think that the government could do better, which to some extent, yes, we think they could have done better. But at the end of the day, we need to understand that this phenomena didn't really existed like 8 weeks ago, and it happened so rapidly that a lot of people, like even the countries, very well-equipped countries in the Western world, they weren't really ready for such a phenomena. So I think what we have done so far, we are trying to help the government. We are trying to, the civil society is coming in, raising awareness, talking to people, and doing everything they can to help the public join hands with the government to stop the spread of this virus.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point where you said that our generation, or I don't think even though the generation above us has experienced such an incident like this one, coronavirus, which is having a huge impact actually on us. And also, I think we share the same cultural background somehow with all the principles and all the ethics and morals that we have where such things as in not greeting someone properly by hugging or shaking hands is seen as an inappropriate behavior. So
One thing,
that's why.
just one thing that India actually have advantage on this is that they do namaste, which is like probably the best way to move forward. It's very
Yeah,
respectful.
it's enhancing our social capital around the world. The soft power is
Absolutely,
back.
yes. Everybody is following that, and I think this is, the best way forward.
Yeah, that's great. So that's how we are coming up with the ideas, which is amazing. And yeah. So, Gersh, moving on to you, I would like to know, Vanchika also mentioned that we are seeing a huge switch from those manual gatherings that we have, the manual activities we did, to the virtual platforms like using webinars and all the other platforms. So, what can you say about that thing?
I'd like to start by mentioning Nassim Taleb's concept called anti-fragile. So there he
Mm-hmm.
talks about systems that gain from disorder. And this is a black swan event, an extremely unlikely event with macro impact all around the world. And this is an opportunity where you will see certain kinds of organizations and companies and communities emerge as anti-fragile. So you will see companies transition their business models, their operating procedures. There are companies funded by the likes of Andreessen Horowitz, I Run the World, which are essentially trying to replicate the experience of conferences online first. I think this very Zoom video call is an example of what you can accomplish when you essentially transform a physical huddle into an online huddle. We're seeing ed tech and AI become extremely important. And when I say ed tech and AI, I don't really mean in terms of buzzwords where it is. I really feel that this is an opportunity to truly democratize access to high quality content and personalize it based on people's needs. So ed tech is an industry people should watch out for. And the overall business model that I'm really interested in is what do you call community as a service. Like you have infrastructure as a service and platform as a service in cloud computing. This that similarly, I think the new talk of town would be community as a service, and I feel Global Shapers is an interesting example. It's a non-profit voluntary initiative, which makes it particularly special. But you will see a lot of for-profit organizations also trying to serve, but along with the business model. So I'm really excited by these trends.
Okay, good. Shamilka, what's your opinion about the switch from those to those virtual platforms, and how are the people dealing with this? Because we are seeing a lot of institutes have started those online classes and other examples such as like this. Also, people who are working are encouraged, instead of working and going to the offices, to work from home. You do meetings through these applications. So how is it in Sri Lanka?
Yes, I myself am working from home and having virtual calls and getting work done online. But then again, we know that not all professions. I am an attorney at law by profession, and in the area where I work, I don't do litigation. So therefore, I am able to work from home. But we know that not everyone are able to. It's not applicable. It's not a blanket approach for all people in different professions or across sectors. Then again, in Sri Lanka, social media plays a massive role. You have again the pros and the cons of it. In Sri Lanka, again, we have a lot of people. When you have the freedom to say whatever you want in social media, a lot of arguments going to and fro, criticizing the government, the good things and the bad things, and we have a lot of fake news going around. That has been a massive issue in Sri Lanka as well, but the police has been able to track some of these people spreading fake news and arrest them as well. So with the negatives of social media, again, online working, we have certain people in certain sectors working online. But definitely at a time like this, during a global pandemic, we see a lot of people have been actively involved in connecting with people, even small businesses who in Sri Lanka we might not think, I mean, before this global pandemic hit us, small vendors may not have even thought of delivering their goods and services online. But now we see small vegetable vendors have come online, and it's very encouraging to see in this era where people are taking proactive steps to go ahead now as they're forced to do this. That is also something good that has come in this situation. So that is pretty much the situation in Sri Lanka. Whoever can work online and whoever can uh, spread the news to gather support, finances to help the underprivileged in Sri Lanka during this crisis, all of those efforts are being taken. Um, so you have again the pros and the cons of
Yes.
having an online platform to deliver what we need to deliver.
Okay, and those people who switch to those platforms, I don't know how is it in Sri Lanka if people used to work online a lot, and is it like that? Did they used to work online a lot
Um,
before?
Again, the concept of working from home, I won't say was very strong in Sri Lanka, because I think all of us in South Asia, we have this, our work culture is such that we usually go to a certain place, we work in an office, and that's how it is generally in South Asia. Um, but now we see a lot of companies, organizations have taken proactive steps to allow their employees to work from home, and it has been proven effective, and it cut a lot of costs. And I think people have found ways. I mean, when a situation like this arises, you have to find ways to overcome this challenge. So that's what I think Sri Lanka is going through now. um, as I said, even small vendors are now pushed to go into online services, which is very encouraging. So although generally we are not people from a culture of working home and having things like, I'm not saying that it was not there. Obviously, with international trade, global mechanisms, we do have a lot of online transactions and online meetings and conferences happening for sure. But now we see visibly a lot of people are working from home, which we have had to take on with this challenge that we're facing.
Okay, Utkarsh, do you have to say something on this? You were like,
Yes, I would. Thank you. I think that in less than 5 years, you will see 90% of the companies become remote first companies. So Matt Mullenweg, who's the founder of or CEO of WordPress and Jetpack and many other of these companies, he runs a remote first company, essentially 800, 900 people coming from 67 countries. And he's done extensive research on the subject. And coronavirus and other emergencies have this ability to sort of fast forward history. So some of the changes that will happen now you will see become cultural norms. And I think remote working is definitely one of them. Remote working isn't just working from home. It's also it's also a construct where you let people be more outcome driven and not input driven. One of my favorite cartoons of the week was that meeting could have been an email, and I found it so hilarious. So many meetings I had without any agenda, and we're all realizing that, oh wow, that was literally 4 sentences of email. So you will see a lot of augmenting of productivity. One area where offices tend to offer the kind of serendipity is influences creativity, where you run into somebody in a cafe or you run into someone in a hall, which is why we have shape conferences, right? We can also have a Zoom call instead, but we have shape conferences to also like enable serendipity. Davos, Dalian, all of them to some extent are there. So I think that area, we still have to figure out a way to replicate that digital serendipity, but there are ways to do it. And some shapers have tried out interesting projects. But I think in terms of productivity, it'll be great for everyone. In terms of creativity, we still have some way to go. 5 years, 90% remote first. is my prediction.
Okay, good. Yeah, it makes sense. Definitely makes sense. Before moving on, I would like to encourage the people who are watching us on Facebook Live. If you have any questions, you can ask us. I will convey those messages to these brilliant people here, and we will try to give you a reasonable response and hopefully answer your question appropriately. So if you have anything, just ask, and we will definitely talk about the questions. Okay, so Vanchika, I would like to continue you. So Shamilka had said a very interesting thing that was misinformation, those fake news that are being spread amongst the common people, which lead to hysteria and panicking and all these things that should not be actually happening in these crucial times. So what can you say about that? Did you observe anything like this? Definitely, I think you have misinformation. You may have get in contact with on your own with some misinformation like this, and how are people dealing with this, like the government, are they taking any measures against these misinformations?
Yeah, so fake news in general is also is an issue in our country, even in general. So in a situation like this, during a black swan event like this, it's all the more important to make sure that we have the resources and tools in place to check that. Whether that means making sure that translation of guidelines such as WHO, other organizations, are brought into vernacular languages and spread off right at the beginning, as opposed to there being a gap, time lag, and then people kind of misinterpreting things and spreading that at a local level. Be it that, or just be it reiterating digital skills and digital as it said, digital sanitation and digital hygiene, and just following those basic set of guidelines becomes all the more important during such a crisis situation. I think third is also bringing in psychologists, mental health people who can support things like mental health and well-being during at this point. We actually, our hub had our second virtual community huddle just yesterday, where we brought in a life coach to come and just speak to our community members and partner members to just normalize things and just talk about the fact that everybody is in this together, and what the realities of the new normal are going to be. So even just having those conversations, even if it is in smaller groups, but I think communities like ours, like the Global Shapers, should use our platform to disseminate information, skills, and just have that conversation. So I think these are three things that come to mind. And I think the fourth is to counter fake news. I think it becomes very important that, and this is where we can deploy technology and digital tools. A lot of local governments and a lot of companies are helping support create like chat boxes and all these kind of things in vernacular languages. So literally people can, for example, a friend just sent me a prototype of one such thing where you can go and just address whatever questions you have, and you'll immediately get like verified sources and verified information. And that's something that's being supported through the right channels, and is being brought out by governments at whatever level. So I think that's another possibility.
Yeah, definitely. It's also it's really important because I feel like in our South Asian countries we have a huge amount of people who are uneducated. So it's I mean, like a lot of awareness is spread about COVID-19, but still it is not like reaching those people. So what I have observed while having a conversation with the other hubs, like African hub or the Middle East hubs, and also what I'm seeing what our hub is doing is that we are like getting all that information that WHO, for example, is publishing and translating them in our local language like Urdu. So is there something that your hub or the government is doing some similar thing to reach out to those people who are not like that well educated?
Yeah. So, for example, at our hub level, in whatever little way possible, we came out with a WHO translated version, a toolkit, a resource toolkit in Hindi about a week and a half back, week and a half, two back, when it was still early times. And now there's been a lot of interest, and even we have tried to get that translated into multiple regional languages, be it Bengali, be it, Malayalam, Kannada, we have multiple different languages, so we're doing that. And the great thing is we've shared that with a lot of our partner organizations as well, who've shared it further down, and it's being used. So that's something in our own little way that we've been trying to do. In terms of with material that the government is coming out with, no doubt there's a lot of stuff that's coming out, right, on a daily basis, on a real-time basis. And I think now the next 2-3 weeks are going to be that critical phase where real-time translation of things into the local languages is key. And just to go back to that other point of just the South Asian context, given that we are living in this time of physical distancing, even if we call it that way, physical distancing is really a privilege in that sense, if you think of it. And the reality is that in South Asian countries, if you take there was an interesting study that came out recently on why probably in countries like Iran and Italy, the disease, the virus has spread faster vis-a-vis maybe some other Western countries. And they've stated that one key reason for that is also the, human, per human, space that each individual has, or each spatial unit within a household, right? So for example, maybe in a lot of Western countries, each individual has their own individual room or space where they can go and quarantine themselves too. But that's not necessarily, or not really the case in countries in South Asia, where you have like 4-5 people all living in a very small space. So how do you physically distance yourself then? That's number one. And number two, the way that's even tied into the fake news aspect that you brought out, the fact is, that environments like that kind of breed the ecosystem for fake news to be produced. If you have huge populations of people who are kind of cooped up into smaller spaces for 3 weeks at a stretch, I mean, making sure that even at the margins, people can be in some way or the other, put to use productively, can carry on with their, businesses or their activities as much as possible. And I think that's where it becomes important that people in the MSME sector, people in those spaces can also carry on their activities. So making sure that productivity even in those spaces continue is another point that I think is important in terms of curbing fake news and ensuring that people don't have spare time to immerse in those activities.
Sadat, I think you need to unmute yourself. We can't really hear you.
Oh. Hello, can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
I wasn't. Okay, so Khalid, I wanted to know, like, how are you people communicating to each other? How are you spreading awareness? I mean, like the government or the hubs or other organizations? Well,
as far as the access to digital, media is concerned, especially the internet, we're not really on the, when it comes to access, we're not really on top of the chain. We have very limited population who have access to internet and social media and all that. So what the government is trying to do is that not only the government is trying to spread awareness, but a lot of these local businesses are also joining hands with them. We'll see, these local TVs, which are, private channels. They are echoing the same concerns that the government have. They are working with the government hand in hand to spread out awareness. They have made small educational videos for the illiterate population, which is a huge population in Afghanistan, so that everybody understands the implication of this virus and how they can at least keep themselves safe first, and then help in not spreading the virus along the way. So it's not only the government, but local businesses have come to help them out. We have a lot of this big business centers, right? A lot of where a lot of people come in and do shopping and all that. So what they have done is they have closed down all the businesses, and at the same time they have eased all the rent or anything for the next 2 weeks, so that they can do their part in helping the people and the government as well. So I agree with what Vanchika said as far as how technology can help in providing awareness and also tackling the issue of fake news. And I also think that it comes back to our individual responsibility as well. The internet is so widespread right now that most of us, without even thinking if the news is right or not, it's just one click away from sharing fake information. So what we are trying to do, and we're trying to communicate with everybody, is that especially at times where everybody is on lockdown and they have nothing better to do, so just go and authenticate if the information is right or not. Go check sources. As Vanshika said, there are a lot of sources where you ask questions and they give you verified answers. These are the things that we as individuals need to do. We as people who consider ourselves responsible, not only towards ourselves, our family, but to the community and the government as well, so that we can go back, check what the news is, if it's right, authenticate it, verify it, and then spread it out so that credible news and credible information is being circulated among the people who might not have the time, or who might not have the resources, or who might not have the competence of verifying or authenticating the sources.
Okay, so thank you, Khalid. Shamelka, I would like also you to tell us about how your country is dealing with misinformation, and how you are communicating to the people. How are you spreading awareness?
Yes, again, in spreading awareness from the perspective of the government, it has been channels through news outlets, social media, and every possible way where the government can disseminate information. And again, even basic things like even before public holidays and curfew was declared over here in Sri Lanka, we had every phone call that we take, and every phone call we receive, we always have this recording in different languages by different service providers giving out information, very basic things, but it's about physical distancing, about washing your hands, about having that, about not panic buying, and very basic things. But we know when you have a, a large geographic location where we have the rural areas and the urban areas, people in rural areas may not necessarily have access to the internet, may not necessarily have even a television in their houses. So there's always this issue on how do we get information to them, because this is a virus where it's you can't say that it might not go to the rural areas. So that is the battle that we have. But even through little things like this, it's not only the government, but even the service providers of the telecommunications sector and every possible activist and organization does their part. From the side of the Global Shapers Candy, what we have done is, again, spreading awareness on health tips and tips to make sure that you would not contract the virus, and how to be socially responsible, as Khalid said before, through our social media campaigns, making sure that whatever information we put out there is in all three languages used in Sri Lanka. And again, to make sure that we spread all positive vibes, we again have social media campaigns as the least that we could do, to just share stories, positive stories of all of us have like plenty of time at our homes being quarantined in this curfew period. So whatever the positive things that we do, trying to put out a positive message and spreading some positive vibe in our capacity is what we are trying to do. in this curfew period as the Candy Hub through social media. So apart from that, every possible thing that the government or the stakeholders who can reach out to all people in Sri Lanka through giving goods to like very subsidized prices and any services that can be provided, all of that has been looked into. It's not only attention has not only been given to the urban areas of the people who can afford it or the people who can, because I mean all of us know that you and I are very fortunate to beat curfew or not, to be at home, to have our meals, to have access to goods and services, and to have a steady flow of income to our families or something of that sort. But we know a lot of people out there don't have that. So it's an effort not only of the government but of you, of me, of everyone. It's a
Yeah.
moment where all of us have to realize that it's a responsibility that we need to carry out collectively, and that's absolutely key.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. We all should be aware of our responsibility. That's the point that I'm just repeating and repeating again in every session. You should be aware of your responsibility and you should contribute. Like, even though you're doing a little bit, just do it because it's really, really important. It's important for the society because we, especially in the South Asian countries, we have a huge amount of people who can't afford those basic things. So we should be working for them. We should be working for ourselves. So Khalid has to say something. Khalid, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on the psychological effects of how people are talking about the coronavirus. Everybody is labeling this virus to be deadly, and there are high mortality rates and all that. Yes, we do understand that, but at the end of the day, we also need to look at the positive sides. We have more than 100,000 people who recovered from this virus. So getting this virus is not really, the end of the world for you. We have to understand and we have to communicate this with everybody out there, that, it's not the end of the world. There's a very high chance that you can recover from this virus, you can beat this virus. Because the way we're communicating right now, the way the whole social media is communicating about this virus is that it's a very deadly virus, and what that does is that even if somebody even if somebody catches that virus, they think like 2 or 3 times before going to the hospital, because the idea is that as soon as you go to the hospital, they will quarantine you, and then you're going to stay there for 14 or 20 days without your family and all that. So yes, that is something that happens, but we also need to make sure that we communicate the positive sides of it as well, so that we create that sense of responsibility, that yes, the virus is there, just like we have the normal flu, or any other viral infections that we get, but there's a very good chance that everybody will recover if you take proper precautions. So it's not really the end of the world, but make sure that not only we take care of ourselves properly, but we also help the other people who are out there fighting this virus, and let's not really be a burden on them as well.
Yeah, like you said, people are thinking twice before actually going to the hospital is because we have a lack of awareness and the lack of communication. So that's really important that we provide necessary information, the right information to the people. So I have a question here from Mr. Muhammad Naeem Nawaz. So I'll just read the question, and then everyone will get a chance to say something on that question. So he is asking, what is the model to ensure that people may not go out of home, especially when poverty rates are so high in countries like Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan? Did you understand all the question?
Was the
Sorry,
question, how do you ensure that people, when quarantined, stick to it? Was that what was asked?
Yeah. The question is like, how do you ensure that people are not going out of their homes? Because people, especially those people who can't afford, have to go out to work. So how can we ensure that those people also stay at home while those poverty rates are so high in our countries? Shamilka, you can just, yeah.
Yes. I don't exactly have a solid answer to that question, because we all know that no one in the world can guarantee that you can keep all the people in your country if it's a period of curfew or quarantine. You cannot guarantee it. The best that you could do is make sure that misinformation is not spread, and you always keep people informed about, as Khalid said, yes, you need to show what the positives of this virus as well, but you also need to tell all the people the intensity. What is the government doing? Where are the quarantine centers? How is it spread? Like proper information, because a lot of people step out of their houses out of, I would say, ignorance most of the time. You might have other cases also where people just try to be, I don't know, adventurous, or you always have a sector of people wherever in the world who would violate no matter what, even though they actually know what's happening. So I don't think anyone can give a solid answer or solution to make sure that you can have like a 100% shutdown where nobody would get out. You also have medical emergencies or any other emergencies that you have to attend to, where you can get a curfew pass and go out. But from what I can think from the top of my head is, you have to keep the people informed, not to hide facts, even if it is really bad in the country, not to hide facts, but make sure that people are informed of everything in real time. So then you know, you're aware of what's going around you, and maybe people can be responsible and to play their part in this crisis. So that's what I have to offer from my side.
Yeah. Vanchika, what's your opinion? Khalid, I will get back to you. First, I'll ask Vanchika what her opinion is about the question. Did you got the question, or should I repeat the question?
Even I didn't get the question. Could you please repeat?
Yeah, okay, I'll repeat the question. So, Muhammad Naeem Nawaz asked, what is the model to ensure that people, Utkarsh, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. I just muted myself. That's all.
Okay. What is the model to ensure that people may not go out of home, especially when poverty rates are so high in countries like Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan?
What? Just the last sentence, please. I missed the word. The connection.
Asking for like, how can we ensure that people, especially poor people, stay at home? Because mostly people like us, we have fortunate, we have the funds, we can stay at home. But some people who earn on a daily basis and need those necessities, how can we ensure that they stay home without like feeling the urge to go out and earn some money because they can't afford, they don't have things. So first Vanchika, then Khalid, and then Utkarsh. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, Vanchika, please.
For this, there are, I mean, there are a few ways of looking at it, right? Now, as you mentioned, for those at the margins, how do we make sure that during this time they have social safety nets, and they're not they don't have compulsions to head out to kind of meet that at least 2 meals a day. So I mean, that's where, I mean, governments really need to kick in, where for example, as I mentioned, in our country there's a financial package that has been announced. This is the time where different civil society organizations need to come in. We have a lot of organizations back home that are now trying to crowdsource clothes, food, grains, all kinds of things, so that they can really deliver these kind of provisions to communities that require them. And it's at times like this when a very intersectional, multi-stakeholder approach is required, especially in a country like India. So how do we galvanize, not just civil society organizations, also private sector organizations, right? And that's something that actually we at our hub, the New Delhi hub, have been in conversation with, CII. So CII is India's largest industry body, and they are also thinking of ways in which they can galvanize their member companies and member individuals who are founders, owners of companies, and make sure that during this time they support their teams, they support their manpower in all possible ways. The other thing that's happening is, for example, in a lot of organizations, people are giving up, say, at least a day's salary, so that that money can go to the PM's national disaster fund, because at least in our country, the coronavirus situation has now been declared as a disaster. So that's another way how the government is trying to support and provide social safety nets, because they have the National Disaster Response Fund as well, which is a separate fund altogether. So I think it's the coming together of all these things. But at a more conceptual, theoretical level, I think just for society at large, and for communities that may not have compulsions to head out but are still lax and are still not following norms, I think it's important to view this entire phase as as they say, looking at the COVID crisis is probably similar to getting a vaccine shot, where you've been induced with a certain amount of the virus to actually make you stronger for future such challenges. So as was brought out by Khalid, that the COVID-19 is actually it's spreading like crazy, but in terms of fatalities, it's still much less than many other things. And if we see it in context, for example, and which a lot of stats very rightly bring out, and I'll bring out two stats here. For example, number one, the number of deaths globally because of COVID is still less than the number of deaths because of TB in India in the last week, right? But TB doesn't get that kind of center stage, because the disease, as a disease, it's mainly prevalent in particular socioeconomic communities that are backward and those in poverty. Similarly, if we look at air pollution, the number of deaths because of air pollution, if I remember the numbers correctly, are almost are extraordinarily more than COVID, but yet it has not got this kind of response. So I think just viewing this as a phase to be more resilient and more perseverant for future challenges as a society, as countries, and as civilizations is another way that I think society at large should and can and should look at it.
Okay. So, Vanchika, you mentioned that there are those financial packages the government is providing, and we are seeing a lot of countries are starting such initiatives. The Mr. Muhammad Nainavas, who asked this question, what I just have conveyed to you, also is asking, like, how long can the government bear that financial burden of providing those packages? Can you, like, approximately, what's your idea, or what would you say about this?
Yeah, no, so I mean, and that's a very pertinent question. I think that's something that all of us will be waiting to see how this unfolds, because okay, for 3 weeks, maybe even 2 months, but how long does this last? And I think that's where not just the country but companies and communities will really have to chip in. I think it'll also be interesting to see internationally how this pans out, right? With the recent suit against China of 20 trillion, because there's obviously going to be huge global pressure on getting China to financially own up to this crisis. The fact that it was unfortunately hidden for so long, and we wouldn't have maybe been in the state that we are if things were stated earlier. So I think how this unfolds, not just nationally but globally, will be very important, because I think this is, after all, a global crisis, and that even the galvanization of funds for the response will have to be done globally. Our Prime Minister very rightly, very cautiously said just yesterday when the lockdown was announced, that if we don't lock down for 21 days, India can go back in history by 21 years. So even at that, at the highest levels, the concern is that genuine, and there's that much caution and worry. So wouldn't want to go into specifics because we really don't know. It's like talking about an unknown. We don't know what the kind of life cycle is going to be of the virus, and all of that. We can predict based on how it unfolded in other countries, but I think we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the answer. It was very well explained. Khalid, so up to you.
All right. Yes, I completely agree with Vanshika um, about the government funding and all that. So the other question that Nawaz actually raised is how long can the government afford to do that? I think for as long as it can. This we're in a crisis situation, and there's a lot of uncertainty going on. We're not really sure what's going to happen, how things are going to unfold, but we're going to keep fighting it, both financially, physically, mentally, for as long as it takes. You cannot assume failure. You cannot just get defeated, because if you do, that's the end of it. So I think as long as it takes, the government will be helping the poor, will be helping the businesses, will be helping the daily wage workers. Given that the government provides funds to that, we also need to ensure that we don't really go into an economic crisis, which we have, but try to mitigate it as much as possible, especially mitigate the disruption of the supply and demand in the market. Because what's happening right now is the supply is being disrupted due to containment efforts, due to restricted mobility, high costs of getting, high costs when it comes to restricted supply chain. And same goes for demand as well. Demand has fallen due to higher rates of uncertainty, due to increased precautionary behavior, due to the rising financial costs. So we have to ensure that we keep things in balance. So when I say we, we're talking about the government. So not only the government provide funds to these daily wage workers and the small businesses, but also at the same time they have to have a lid on how the supply and demand works in the government, because if they don't control that, we can very easily go into a huge economic crisis that coming back from it will be, it's going to take us years and years.
Oh, sure. Utkarsh, I would like to hear what you have to say about the question that was asked on Facebook, and also tell me about like the economy afterwards. Like, what are your views about the impact on the economy in relation to the question?
Sure. I feel that this is not the first or the last disruption that we're going to experience as a collective. It's just that talking about disruption and experiencing disruption are very different. You'll remember many times at the forum also, we've discussed the disruption that will happen when AI or takes away some jobs that can be replicated. In an oblique way, this is a very similar disruption that people who are daily wage owners, especially the ones that need to go to office, have like are finding it challenging. And one solution which was articulated in the forums blog and the book that Professor Schwab has written is about the insurance, the pool of insurance that the governments need to put together for moments like these. So in India, one interesting trend has been the 2% CSR, corporate social responsibility funding, has now been prescribed towards COVID. So that's a healthy step. But I also feel that you need to build both a national as well as an international pool of money that can be kept, where people who are displaced because of emergencies or disruptions due to automation are being able to compensate it. And I think this will bring to bear the conversation about universal basic income and universal basic services, because now is the time where you do need some sort of a basic income. And I don't want to get into the UBI UBS debate, but I think if anything, COVID-19 proves that you need both universal basic services and a bare minimum income for everyone who falls below a threshold as well. So I think that's one thing I'd like to share about what can be done. So allocate the CSR money towards emergency and build a fund for this emergency and for future. And some of the steps taken in India seem to be in the right direction. In terms of the broader question on how will the economy respond or when will the economy respond, I think it's really hard to say at this moment. So if you study, say, Asian markets, they are in a particularly challenging state. It's really been bad. But simultaneously, you saw just out of nowhere a few days back, the American stock in like of many tech companies was growing consistently. It reached actually a peak also. So we are living in confusing times, and making an economic prediction is something we need more data on. But I think it's safe to say that there will be no going back. I think the coronavirus will really change the way people think of economy, think of insurance, and we will have to really translate the words public-private partnership into tangible outcomes when it comes to things like this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I hope the question which was asked could be answered in the best interest, but I really think you all had so much well points, and definitely it's like there are no measures, no estimates that can be made right now on the economy, as it first said, but we really hope for the best, definitely. So, Shamolka, I would like to continue with you. So we have talked about the economy overall, and what I also think is really interesting is education. How are the education systems dealing with it? Because, like we also discussed, we already discussed the switch from the manual, from going to those institutes to those digital platforms. And yeah, tell me something about how is it in Sri Lanka?
Yes, you want me to speak about both the economy and education, or?
Yeah, you can. If you have to say something about the economy, you can start with that and then go on to education.
Yeah, just a few words about the economy in Sri Lanka. Definitely has been hit, especially after the Easter attacks that happened last year, the terrorist attacks during Easter in hotels and churches. It was a massive blow to the tourism industry in Sri Lanka, especially being an island that is one of the major ways where Sri Lanka earns a massive portion of its income. We were just lifting our heads up from that attack, and now this happens. So with the disruptions in global trade and tourism happening all around, our economy is definitely hit very hard, and especially talking about the informal sector of daily wage earners, where they have lost their livelihoods. So that will definitely be more felt ahead in time to come, when the impact is actually felt by all Sri Lankans. To speak about education in Sri Lanka, we have one of the highest literacy rates around the world, actually, in Sri Lanka. But that being said, soon as this issue came at the very initial stage, even before curfew was imposed, we had schools closed. Right now, all schools are closed till the 20th of April. And all universities closed. So nothing is happening, exams postponed, education is all halted. But in certain universities, they're having classroom sessions online, and students are given assignments, and all of that is being done. But that being said, I think, again, another issue in the South Asian context is that we are not very much into online learning. I don't know a lot in Sri Lanka, actually. It's a very limited number of people or students or organizations who would go into that. We still have that very traditional and conventional classroom learning structure that has been followed, I think, in many of our South Asian countries. So particularly in Sri Lanka, I want to see a 360 change in the way that the classroom should be redefined, and the education system should be redefined. And at times like this, we understand how crucial and important it is to have online learning platforms and to have a student-centric approach where students learn and research themselves, unlike teachers and the system just spoon feeding. So because of that traditional and conventional classroom teaching technique or system that is prevalent in Sri Lanka, education right now during this crisis is definitely not functioning, apart from maybe a couple of schools, a couple of institutions who are capable or having that mechanism to provide online lectures and other study material. So apart from that, due to the reasons I said, education is at a standstill until we get over this crisis.
Yeah, good. Because I personally am interested in this topic education because I, as a student, I know in Pakistan there is like online classes. They have been implemented and people are using them for a long time now. But what I see like right now, the situation is I am taking those online classes, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to study yet because I am not seeing a future in taking an exam. So my question is like, how are kids there in Sri Lanka having this? How are they dealing with the situation? Are they into studies right now, or is that being pulled? Because you said the exams are being postponed as all around the world. But how far is that? Does it have an impact on the children for their studies?
So in Sri Lanka, education is free of charge. That's one of the privileges we have both at school level and also universities. But we also do have the private institutions where foreign universities conduct courses or offer foreign degrees in Sri Lanka. So the educational institutions which have a foreign exposure, most of them they do have online resources, online libraries, and they have access to material. They can continue their studies. But in the perspective of the local schools, public education in Sri Lanka is absolutely brilliant, although in terms of technology, all those schools or the system might not be far ahead, but in terms of curriculum and the syllabuses and all of that, public education in Sri Lanka is pretty solid. But now everything is very disrupted, and there's obviously there are no people to monitor the students in terms of how they're working or the assignments given to them. So what I can say is just disrupted, apart from a few educational institutions which are properly tracking the students. But we know even universities around the world are shut down. So there is nothing methodical that's happening. It's just whatever the students are willing to do at home, because there's no monitoring process. So it's just, if you work at home, it's your own benefit. Apart from that, apart from the assignments that students may have to submit and all of that, uh, what I can say is right now education is in a situation where it's disrupted due to the crisis. So until things normalize again, there's nothing much the students can do apart from just going ahead with what they can do for themselves at home.
Yeah, because I feel like people who work and they are still in that routine that they are doing their work instead of going to the offices, they're doing it from their homes. But students who are like encouraged, like literally when they are in the schools, when the teachers are teaching them, they might have a different impact on them. So thank you so much. Khalid, what can you tell me about? Yeah, what did you say?
I'm sorry, just to add a small thing is that, again, in the South Asian context is another thing where not all people across the country have access to the internet. So we have schools with very little privileges, extremely poverty-stricken schools also out there. So it's just out of question for them to even continue their learning process because they just haven't used a smartphone or any access to internet. So we have that element playing in the background as well.
Yeah, great, definitely. Khalid, can you tell me something about the current education system, how the education is being dealt with in your country?
Very similar to what Shamilka said. We're going through similar challenges. But what we have seen is that yes, we have very few limited private institutions that are providing online classes. So that's something that's going on. But what I've seen is that this COVID-19 has made us, look into other ways of, being creative and how we can change the educational system, which is very traditional and very conventional. So in one of the provinces, what's happening right now, and I was really, amazed to hear about this, just because not everybody has access to internet, but we have a very large population who have TVs, right? And they have these local TVs that they have access to. So what the provincial government has done, they have gone into an agreement with the local channels, where they teach these kids in different classes and different timings. So this was something really cool. We didn't really, I never thought something as such could happen, but this is a pilot phase. Most probably we're going to do that if we see that it's a success, and we can look into some tangible results from it. Probably we'll try to expand that to other provinces as well. But at the same time, we have this institution called the Technical and Vocational Educational Training. It's a government entity that is working on a mechanism to see how we can provide like catch-up classes or accelerated lessons, so that when this COVID-19 situation is done and dusted, how these kids can catch up whatever period they have lost. So these are the two things that we're doing right now, and hopefully, if the local TV teaching lesson or whatever they call it is a success, probably we'll be expanding that to other provinces as well.
It's good. It's new thing what I heard about the TV and the local TV channels connecting with the government and starting this initiative. That's great. Vanishka, can you tell us something about India, the current situation regarding the education?
Yeah, so as Khalid mentioned, even we have a few schemes where TV channels are to directly showcase educational lessons and so on. And I believe that right now is when they're like amplifying them, and there's more demand because schools have been shut and exams have been postponed and all of that. So that's definitely one aspect. The other is, again, as you mentioned, accelerated learning. I think if I'm just to take a step back and to think of the COVID context in general, and this, what I'm saying, also ties into the previous question that you had addressed and you'd asked on the economic aspect. So some intellectuals and academicians are saying that, again, this could be in waves or in cycles, right? So we could face a spike, and then it kind of then there's a lull, and then again the crisis could come back again. We don't know, because it's said that even once you get COVID, you could even get it again. And that the other point is that even if you try and flatten the curve, but there will be it's not about if there'll be a peak, there will be a peak. You can just keep delaying it. That's also another point that's made. So I think economic systems, educational systems, and so on will all have to maybe think of ways in which, if this is to stay on for much longer, how to orient around it, right? So for example, in the economic aspect, if we know that for the next 3-4 weeks this is a situation of a lockdown, then things may go back to relative normalcy. Then we have a window of a breathing window where things can go back to normal. If things are fine, we don't go back to business as usual, we go back to the relative normal stage. And then again, be prepared that again, if we go into a stage of spike, then again, so kind of like periods of intense economic educational activity, and then maybe periods of relative lull, and then again, just maybe even just theoretically, conceptually thinking about different ecosystems working to these kind of, to catering to the way the virus cycle is. And obviously saying that because of just the scale that it's at. So I think things like even future of work, like all these concepts will be accelerated, and it's also an opportunity if we look at it that way, to kind of see how we can leapfrog to some of these concepts. So I think even the future of education then would have to be rethought. And it's interesting to see friends who are at universities, saying that they're having their first, like a first virtual graduation. So a friend of mine put up a status saying that, didn't expect graduating from Harvard virtually, and who would have thought that? But things like this are happening, and I think it's really going to force us to disrupt and think creatively and innovatively. And also tying in the social and physical contact part, what happens when things become more and more digital? And that's great and all of that, but let's not forget that a lot of what we've learned in educational spaces and so on is through our physical contact with people and our conversations and our in-person equations and so on, stuff like that. So how do we then recreate, still manage to continue spaces and create new spaces where we can still congregate back? And that ties into the previous point, the earlier point that Utkarsh was making. Even if we look at our own community, like the shapes or forum events, like they've all been postponed to to the latter half of the year, and we still don't know if they're going to be happening. So how are things like that, how do we still embed things like that and make sure that we can still continue catering to physical gatherings as well? Because it is a different matter when humans congregate together in person. It is a different learning experience, there is a different energy. So while as many things can go online, but we also have to make sure that we can still have those spaces intact. Can't hear you. Can't hear. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. So I really think it's interesting, the points you all mentioned, and I'm really, really looking forward to the situation after COVID is finally away and done, and what kind of impact this will have on our lives, because there will be so many changes, and this situation will coin definitely our future. And yeah, let's see. So Utkarsh, what's your opinion on all these things, please?
Yeah, I mean, on the education, I see that it's a huge opportunity for South Asia to embrace digital education. So while we've seen a proliferation of content in the past few years, I think ed tech actually it's still in its nascency. Many companies, many people have built education companies, and many people have built technology companies, but very few companies have been able to combine both of them. I think China is a good model to look at some of the interesting use cases of education and AI. So we have to solve both the access problem of quality education and also, its problem of quality. So technology has a huge role to play. And all South Asian countries are starved of teachers, especially starved of teachers who want to teach, who are motivated to teach. And I think we have to complement that gap using technology. And there are many specific use cases. I'll encourage everyone to check out Financial Times AI and Education a brief that came out recently. These are 4 interesting case studies of what's going on. I'm really encouraged. I want to see South Asia become an ed tech first, area. And for ed tech to work, you need the community to complement it. So ed tech needs the community to thrive, and community needs personalization to thrive. So community aspect, we are trying to figure out through models like the Global Shapers and the ed tech. And I think we really need to look at some of the common challenges South Asian nations have, what India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, all of these countries have, and look at what can be solved. A very simple example is learning levels in all of these 4 countries is terrible. Almost half of our 5th graders can't do standard 2 math. So we can together use this opportunity to look at how can we collectively augment math scores using technology, because it's a common challenge. So let's use this as an opportunity to stop thinking nation first. We really need to think of solving the child's need and thinking of internationalism and interlinkism. It's very important to address education. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree with all of you, and I think there will be definitely some changes within the traditional way we used to do to deal with things, especially in the South Asian countries, where we have that common way of dealing with situations and a common culture. So it's for me definitely really interesting to see what kind of future this brings to us. So I would like to know your personal experience about how your life has been impacted by the current situation of COVID-19. Chamilka, could you continue, please?
Yes, in terms of my life, how it has been, I'm working from home. So that takes up some time of my day. And I am working, my usual work routine is I work out of home. So I am not with my family. But now, due to this, I've been fortunate to spend time with my family, to be with my family. And that's extremely very precious to me to spend time together, and that has meant a lot to me. So apart from that, any other activities that we can do through the Global Shapers Candy Hub and several youth organizations in Sri Lanka, again, all these activities, live sessions like this, online sessions, are being conducted jointly with other youth organizations. So I consider myself extremely privileged to be at home with my family, to be able to eat my 3 meals and all of that. And knowing that so many out there don't have that, I really urge all our viewers today just to spread the message wherever you are, in whichever the part of the world, uh, to help your neighbor, to even online, to just say hi to a friend, maybe just ask how he is, how she is. That small gesture means a lot. So it's about rethinking to connect with a lot of people and to engage in conversation and to make sure that this time that you have is meaningfully spent, to spread something positive, because even online you can do so much. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Chamilka. Wanchika, what's your personal experience with the current situation? What kind of impact did it had on your life?
So I think firstly, just making sure that even in such times, going about your daily routine as much as possible, as you normally do, is important. So be it working out, or be it just getting ready by a certain time, of scheduling your day of in a certain way. I think those are important, and I think that was something that we were also sharing with our community during our community huddle yesterday, that just being at home or working from home doesn't mean that your schedule has to go for a toss. I think that's very important, that maybe even within your physical space, try and identify certain areas where you're more productive. Certain tasks can be done in certain spaces. When you're relaxing or taking a recreational break, you can move to certain spaces. Of course, having said, I mean, this is for people who have the privilege of having the choice of moving and movement, in their in their homes. But if you do, then definitely do that. And I think just making sure that you continue with your physical and nutritional routine the way that you do is important. I think in our hub, we have really been doing multiple things, and it was great to see that the conversation started actually much before the virus hit India. I think that was also a result of the fact that because this is a larger global community, the conversations were already happening in a lot of regional groups, and certain hub members felt that. And I think that gave us the ability to kind of really take the lead on many things. We've started a lot of initiatives. So the past few days have actually literally just flown by, because I've just been coordinating things left, right, and center, because we're trying to do as much as we can, be it through our and I'd like to take the opportunity to share some of those interventions and some of the things that we're trying to do. be it number one, the virtual community huddle webinar series that we've started. We had one on just navigating the COVID crisis. The second one was on mental health. We're doing a third one this Saturday on business response and what are the different tools and methodologies that company owners, etc., can take to. And that's going to be a 3-hour deep dive session that we're doing. Fourth is we're trying to get people to speak about just problem solving and COVID, like COVID and problem solving at large. And then we're trying to bring another lens that we're trying to look at is citizen response and then community response. So we've actually planned a number of webinars for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and that's one of our initiatives. The second thing that we're doing is we have basically, as I mentioned before, put together this resource toolkit, which we're trying to translate into as many languages as possible and share it amongst as many communities and people that we can. The third is we within our hub, few of us are trying to identify 5 to 10 orphanages that we can support in the next 3 to 6 months through logistical support in terms of goods, commodities, ration, etc. So that's the third. And fourth, that something interesting that we're trying to do, and I would like to use this platform to announce that, is that we thought, let's try and see how we can galvanize all the hubs in India at large to be prepared for if we need to be plugged in somewhere if the situation becomes really worsens. So we are putting together an India versus COVID-19 Indian Global Shapers skill bank. So we're trying to do a quick mapping of skills of all the 30 hubs in India, all members of the 30 hubs in India, by tapping the focal points who are the curators and getting that information where people can map out whether they can provide technical skills, legal, financial, strategic, consulting, etc., so on. And those can be mapped so that if and when, say, if governments or any corporates want to tie up with global shapers, as a whole, we have all 30 hubs in our country that can come together and deploy ourselves either at the national or at the state level. So that's something really cool that we're trying to do. And I think will be a good exercise for this crisis, but also for our own mapping our own community in India. So that's something that I'm happy to announce. And the last thing is that we're also exploring maybe doing a study on mapping the COVID crisis and how it unfolds in India at large. And that would be more of a knowledge exercise, but that's also something that we're considering. So.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see how people are actually using the situation to connect with each other and those initiatives that have been started. And I'm seeing a lot of hubs doing starting those webinars where they can talk about mental health and all the other issues which are concerning people in the current situation while staying at home and social distancing, or as we call it, physical distancing. And our hub has some same initiative to start it. There will be a hub member who will be talking about these issues and measures and how we can actually, if I can call it so, survive the time we are while we are at home. So these are really important aspects. So I would like to move on to Khalid because Khalid has to leave soon. So Khalid, can you tell me about your personal experience with COVID-19? How much does all these things have an impact on your life?
Well, on a personal level, it hasn't really changed much because, this was my very first day of working from home. But we did, take some extra precautionary measures. So, for example, when it came to, hugging each other in the morning in the office, we're not really doing that on regular basis now. So we have changed the handshakes to fist bumps. And personally speaking, I'm using hand sanitizers a lot more than I used to. So that's the only, that's the only thing that has changed in my personal life. But as we move forward, as we see the severity of COVID-19, I think it's definitely going to have impact on the personal routine and also on the psychological levels of individuals, be it being at home or outside. So yes, it hasn't really changed much in the past 2-3 weeks, but probably it's going to have its effect in the next coming 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and apart from this, I also would like have a little conversation with you right now because you have to leave soon. What kind of activities is your hub like initiating? Can you tell us something about like regarding COVID-19?
Oh, we're looking into obviously we're looking into raising awareness on how to keep personal hygiene, washing hands, keeping the social distance that's necessary. And also we're trying to, give them valid information, but give public valid information on how this virus actually spreads. There's a lot of misconception that kind of, as soon as you pass by a person, there's a very good chance that it's going to spread. No, it's actually when it comes to contacting, and we're going into a lot of technicalities when it comes to making sure we keep it contained. All these containment efforts are properly undertaken. So those are the things we are doing. Awareness raising campaigns. We are also looking into, like, when it comes to hubs, we have delayed all our meetings. So now what we're doing is it's either a WhatsApp call or a lot of WhatsApp messaging. And at times we only gather in a group of 3 to 4 people at a time, just to avoid large gatherings, and at the same time observe proper distance between each other, so that we ourselves are following the rules, so that tomorrow when we're telling somebody else, so
Yeah.
that we can be that example as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, before leaving Khalid, I would like to know, or do you have any message for the people who are currently watching or who will be watching this video that you would like to convey to them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. COVID-19, it's here, it's a crisis. And yesterday I said that right now it's a very difficult situation,
Yes.
but we want everybody to stay positive. We want everybody to stay strong, because we have survived quite a lot in the past, and we're going to survive this one as well. We're going to get through this, and all the shiny days will be back again. So just make sure that you do your part. Everybody does their individual part, and then collectively it's going to result in a much bigger purpose. So that's all I have to say. And then thank you very much for creating this platform. I think we should do this more often, not only on COVID-19, but all the other social issues that we have, the common challenges that we have in South Asia, and how we can tackle them both individually and collectively as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I was glad when I heard that I had got the opportunity to have to like be on Zoom with you all here, because it's really important that we connect to each other, because we know we have this political crisis as well in some countries, but we should tell the people, we should like illustrate them that we are actually beyond these things, because we are the same, we have the same cultures, we have the same society norms. So thank you very much, Khalid, for joining us today, and I really hope to stay in touch with you and all the other people as well. But it's sad that you just had so much time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. You guys are doing a great job, Vanshika, Shamilka, and Utkarsh. Keep on, being awesome as always, because, all of us, we're shapers. We're out there to shape the community and the world. All right. So you guys, please carry on, and we'll be in touch.
Khalid.
Yeah, guys, even I'll have to leave shortly. So let's, I'm happy to address any questions, and you guys can carry on.
Okay, great. Okay, Khalid, thank you so much. Bye. Okay, Gert, basically I was about to continue with you. Can you tell us what kind of impact the whole situation had on your life?
Sure, I think it's a really important opportunity for us. I was about to get married to a fellow global shaper from the Oxford Hub this summer in Oxford, where I was heading as a Shivning Fellow. but both my fellowship at Oxford and our wedding got postponed because of the Corona crisis. So both of us are now writing a book on love and work in the time of Corona. So it'll be a cross-hub project, and we're very excited to do that. We have a couple of publishers interested. We'll pick one next week. So that's been the personal impact. The professional impact has been that Network Capital, my community, we've been trying to make sure that in terms of mental health, in terms of professional career success, and in terms of making sure that people who are feeling disoriented at this time have constant support, both human as well as technological. So it's been a great opportunity to really measure what matters, think about what matters to me as an individual and to my larger community. And so grateful to be a part of Global Shapers. I think here all of us are trying to come together, and like really proud of my hub for doing such interesting things. And I'm just really happy to be a part of the community and really look forward to contributing. I think this is also an important wake-up call for the shapers, of all of us. We've been doing a lot, but it's time to perhaps think of being even more coordinated towards some issues and challenges. So this is both a wake-up call as well as an opportunity, but also a time to be happy about our community, what values we stand for, and what we do. Thank you so much for putting this call together, and for whoever else is listening. I think we're all in this together. Let's figure out how to deal with it. Thanks.
Sure. Are you looking forward to leave now, or would you like to stay till the end?
No, I can stay on for a few more minutes, but I do have another call to jump on to in a few minutes. So
Good. Then I would like okay, because I wanted to talk to Shamilka right now. So I would like to thank you for joining us today. It was really, really important to have you all here. I will continue with the ladies later on, but one last point I would like to know is about, you told me you had to say something about empathy in this situation. Yeah. Can you bring about this topic?
Absolutely. Empathy is a muscle. If you exercise, if you work out, your muscles grow. The same is true for empathy as well. So this is also a time where all of us, as individuals and as community members, can grow our empathy with practice. Because as we discussed in the call, there are people who are more impacted by us. There are people who are far more affected by us. How do we serve them? For our people who have lost lives, how do we serve them? Empathy, actually, a lot of research suggests that empathy reduces with distance and time. But this is a time in the history where all of us are in this together. And it's an opportunity for us to grow our empathy. I think if you look at the conversation in the past 2 years, a lot has been spoken about technology, but not enough concretely about empathy and mental health. And I feel the COVID-19 crisis is a time to bring back empathy to the discussion table, and not in terms of platitudes, but in terms of concrete next steps. And I encourage people to check out the research of like an American researcher of Pakistani origin, Pakistani Latin American origin, Jamil Zaki, who studies a lot about empathy. He's the one who's done research on empathy as a muscle concept. I have an article coming out on this in a few days, so I'm going to share it with you. But do remember, you're not born empathetic or non-empathetic. It's something that you coach yourself into, and let's as shapers coach our empathy and build our empathy muscle in the coming days to come.
Okay, quickly on this one, like, can you share how how someone can train this muscle, the empathy muscle?
Sure. Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we are hearing you.
Okay. Yeah. So one way to augment one's empathy is to essentially try and do one empathetic deed every day, and measure progress on how you perform. So let's talk about climate change. Many people talk about climate change, but many people are actually indifferent to it because they think it's not my problem. Or by the time I'm actually impacted by climate change, I'll be long gone. So who cares? So again, Jamil Zaki suggests that, like, do a little bit more every day. But he suggests that if you see yourself, or if you're able to see yourself as part of a larger time and space, like you're not just a part of human being living for 70, 80 years, but you're a part of a civilization who is, who transcends time, and you're able to look back and look forward to. It's a very healthy practice. So it turns out that the longer you trace back your civilization, the more empathetic you can feel. So there is a lot of research that studies the difference between empathy quotients of newer countries, relatively newer formed countries, and older countries. So time definitely helps, and seeing yourself part of a community, a broader space, and not just as an individual, is an important step in that direction. And it definitely rubs off on other people as well. So when you are trying, when you do one act of kindness, other people in your neighborhood or in your community are also inspired to do so. And there have been innumerable number of case studies of former white supremacists who have now evolved and now evangelists for peace. So everyone can change. No one is born with empathy or not with without empathy. And you can train your empathy muscles by a little bit of practice, and seeing yourself as a part of larger continuum space-wise helps, and time-wise.
Thank you. Could you mention an example of training the empathy muscle regarding this current situation, COVID-19?
Sure. So if you look at, let's look at the people who are worst, who are impacted the worst. So one way to look at it would be, let me make sure that my family is okay and my friends are okay, and to hell with the world. They'll take care of their problems. And the other way to approach the same problem is to look at, if from a strictly utilitarian standpoint. I think now the world is very clear. You are only as safe as the least healthy person. So simply utilitarian, if you want to use your common sense muscles, it's very clear that you need to keep everybody safe, and you being safe won't work. But also, if you train to think in terms of empathy, you just want to visualize who that person is and how that person is suffering. So let's go back to the definition of empathy. Empathy is being able to experience another person's pain. And you're able to only experience another person's pain when you visualize it. For example, let's take men and women. For me as a man to relate to some of the issues that are specific to women, I really need to make conscious attempts to understand, read, visualize, ask. So the same concept holds for anything that you are not directly experiencing. So there are many things that many of us sitting in air-conditioned rooms and offices are not experiencing right now. But it doesn't mean that we don't have the capability to experience it. Now is the time to really try and visualize what it feels like to be disenfranchised and in a state where others don't have the privileges as you do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Without taking any more time of yours, I would like to thank you. You definitely have contributed to this conversation, and I'm really sorry for your marriage that has been postponed. And I hope everything gets well soon. I'm really looking forward to the book. And yeah, so thank you very much for joining us today. I'll continue with the ladies then.
Sure. Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Bye bye. Okay, so now it's us. Vanchika already told us about the hub's activities which have been taking place, which are amazing. So, Shamilka, can you tell us something about your hub? Like, what kind of activities are they taking? What kind of measures are they implementing regarding COVID-19?
Yes, so first of all, I definitely commend Vanishka, her hub, and also all other Indian hubs who are doing amazing work in terms of this crisis. In terms of the Candy Hub, what we're doing is two campaigns as of now. Firstly is both of these being led by the public relations team of the Candy Hub. The first being on awareness of COVID-19. Again, we have 3 languages that we use in Sri Lanka. We use Sinhala, Tamil, and English. So all our videos and whatever the content with regards to COVID-19 are being translated into these 3 languages and being posted on our social media platforms. So that's number 1 in terms of awareness. And number 2 is we started this challenge, which we thought might be something fun to do with all our hub members and all those who are connected with us, which went along the lines of quarantainment, where we wanted to share a positive story during our quarantine period that we are undergoing these days. So anything that you do, even be it watching a movie or doing something new, reading a book or whatever it is, during this time where a lot of negative information and a lot of negative vibes are spread, we wanted to just make this simple effort to make sure that something positive also is just thrown out to our fellow shapers and other friends and family who are out there. So these are the 2 main campaigns that were headed by a public relations team in response to COVID-19.
Okay, great. So yeah, definitely our hub is being active as well. So as I told you, like about how we are translating those English messages about awareness into our local languages. And apart from that, what we have started is like we are producing hand sanitizers. Like we have already produced like up to 50,000 in association with local support. And that was due to because we had a huge shortage on hand sanitizers and masks. So can you tell me something about this, Vanishka? Like, is there been like observed any kind of shortage in your country, in India?
You mean shortage in general or with regard to certain products?
Yeah, because like for instance, like I was telling you in Pakistan, it was like mask and hand sanitizer. That there's a huge shortage of this. As you can see in the Western countries, there's a huge shortage of toilet paper. So is there anything similar happening in India?
Yeah. No, so of course, I mean, we have been experiencing similar shortages as well in terms of, your masks, the N95 masks, your PPE kits, etc. And that is the biggest challenge because our hospitals and health facilities are very understaffed, even logistically. So right now, companies and communities, government is really trying to amp up efforts to make sure that these supplies supplies don't run out, that we have a pipeline of supplies still going on, that manufacturing of these products doesn't stop during these times, and actually to also counter and check that people don't unnecessarily add burden to the health facilities. Our government has recently announced new telemedicine rules and regulations just yesterday, so that people who don't have urgent needs and can, solve things, with the doctor just a call away, can do so. So, for example, that's one thing that's happened. The other is, obviously e-commerce companies have really kicked in. So making sure that just the delivery and the demand and supply chain doesn't get distorted. That's another thing. But no, of course, overall, we are facing similar issues that all the South Asian countries are.
Okay, great. Shimaka, can you tell me something about any shortage occurring in your country, Sri Lanka?
Yes. So in terms of essential goods, of course, we've had no shortage so far. There's been a steady flow of goods. But in terms of personal protective equipment or sanitizers or and even ventilators in hospitals, there's been a shortage, but it's just very encouraging and beautiful to see in Sri Lanka. Even in terms of PPE and masks, there were stories starting from prisoners in Sri Lanka to just volunteers, random people, just making this equipment with the resources given to them and just freely distributing to our health workers. So that was very encouraging. And even things like ventilators in hospitals. In the event of shortages for ventilators, university students, undergraduates and graduates together started building ventilators in their laboratories. And even university students were even testing samples to see whether certain patients were declared positive or negative for COVID-19. So it has been really encouraging to see a lot of people around the country, not just limiting themselves to their designated roles, but even just random people just saw about 250 to 500 masks and just freely distribute them. So that is how it has been combated in Sri Lanka, where it has not only been the role of the government. So apart from essential goods, of course, Sri Lanka has been having a steady flow so far.
Okay, good. Apart from the conversation at all, is there anything you would like to add? Like any topic, any point what you think is important to convey to the people?
Just, I think, also picking up from, we spoke about empathy. I think picking up from that, we just need to realize at a crisis situation like that all of us have an equal and important responsibility. Even just staying at home, it is a responsibility that you have, and you contribute to combating this issue at large. So what I just want to reiterate is that it is a collective effort. Combating COVID-19 is not the business of the government alone, wherever it is in the world. All of us have a responsibility, be it large or small, and we need to realize that to have a collective effort to make sure we combat this. And apart from that, we see a lot of things changing, a lot of things being seen from different lenses, different perspectives, even education or work and societal interactions are all being redefined at this point of time. And I just want everyone to make sure that you're very open-minded and you embrace these positive changes and you try to see things differently, because these are hard times, but if you're just open-minded enough to support each other and to embrace change, I think that's very important, to go ahead with a healthy mind. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, definitely it is. Vanishka, what's your, sorry, Vanchika, what's your last point you would like to add to the conversation?
I would just say that you know, this is a really unprecedented time that we're living in. You know, I believe that even something with all that, you know, the largest of things being shifted or pushed back, be it the Olympics, which has now been pushed by a year, to, you know, the Cannes Film Festival, which is now you know, providing its infrastructure to actually the homeless to come and, you know, to give them shelter in these times, to you know, everything under the sun. Like, who would expect that something like this would happen, not because of a war, but actually because of an invisible virus, you know, and reminds us of, I think, in this current time of, you know, a lot of countries becoming increasingly a bit more xenophobic and nationalistic in an unintended and weird way. You know, it is a global challenge, which is again reminding people that as much as we may like it or not, we are still, you know, one global village. And with a crisis like this, the overall recovery of the world at large will also be possible only with a global response. So in a sense, you know, if you look at it, it's actually the you know, the virus can be seen as a medium that's in a way propagating globalism in some forms and in some not, but you know, I think it fits, it brings that theme into the conversation as well. So
definitely. Okay, once you have mentioned that point, I think it's important I had a live session with the African region hubs. So this is for both of you. You can both mention or respond to this. And then we discussed like the picture, which you might also have seen of Venice, where the rivers were all, because people are not going out, the rivers are clear now. There are fishes and there are swans back into the river. So what we pointed out was like kind of it was an action taken by the nature itself, because we needed kind of some time, we needed a break. And I really like the point of views that they had. So what's your point of view, Vanchika? And then I would like to go to Shamika.
Oh, you mean in terms of just nature reclaiming its space
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
world?
Point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even with the lockdown, you can't really hear any cars or horns or any of the honks or any of that. What you are hearing are birds chirping. Delhi has a very bad air pollution situation, which peaks during like the winter period, and our levels have dropped multifold. So the air has improved with the lockdown. So I think I think it totally, as some people are saying, it can be seen and is a way of nature actually reclaiming its space and place on the planet as well.
Yeah. Shamika, what's your point of view to this particular point?
Definitely a wake-up call to the entire world, where we see the carbon footprint drastically reduced. And again, nature has taken its place and has taken course. So it's time for us to think about it again, where we're at a day and age where we are all at a rat race. It's just about producing more and more, and globalism and or globalization has been defined in a very different way, which is not necessarily very healthy for the future of the world, and also to the future generations of this world. So it's time. There's evidence out there for us to look and rethink of our efforts and what we need to do to be responsible global citizens, in understanding that we are part of nature, that that nature can definitely go on without humans, but we certainly can't. So it's a wake-up call for all multinational organizations and governments all around the world to take proactive action and to rethink in terms of manufacturing or their policies or their whatever. They need to think green, because there's certainly an impact, and we've seen results.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's the end of the conversation. Thank you very, very much for being here with me today. I'm really looking forward to having multiple conversations, and I will definitely get back to you people. And yeah, I think we all know borders are closed everywhere, all around the world, but it doesn't mean we can't connect as we're connecting right now, whereas people are always having those issues with, like, for example, COVID-19 is just showing us we are all one, because we are having those political issues, like I mentioned before, like India versus Pakistan. But still, we are here supporting each other, and that's, I think, a major, major point which should be highlighted. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to be in contact in future with you people. And yeah, I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much for joining me today. And yeah, I really hope you stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Thank you. Okay, bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.